Is your dealership scamming you? Every time you go in to buy a new motorcycle, they walk you to the service department, at which point the service guy says, "See you in 600 miles for your first expensive service." Now, the price of that first service is going to vary bike to bike as well as based on your local rates for labor. However, you can basically assume that for parts and labor on an Italian motorcycle or an upmarket bike, you're looking at something close to 600 or 700 bucks just to get your oil changed and have some bolts tightened. Now, if you're anything like me, that seems a bit like highway robbery. So I'm gonna walk you through exactly how I do my 600-mile service so that you guys don't have to spend a crap ton of cash right after buying your brand new bike. Now, if you were paying attention to the thumbnail, you saw this logo right here, and that means that this is a part of the Aprilia Creator GP series, which is a series where Chase on Two Wheels, 650 Ebe, and myself have teamed up with Aprilia, Motivation, Moto Million, Moto America, Alpine Stars, Cardo, Break Free, and a whole bunch. Like, seriously, there's so many brands that we've teamed up with. And we're actually going to be racing these motorcycles. Chase has a 210 660 and Ebe has an RS 660, and we're gonna be throwing down at the ARD at NJMP. And to make sure that this motorcycle is in tip-top shape, we do have to service this thing up. Now, before we dive in, I do wanna let you guys know that today is the last day that you can get entered to win the August prizes. And if you want the best chances to win, you gotta be paying attention because there are 6 codes buried somewhere in this video. Each one of those is worth 75 points. You can get a max of 450 points out of this video, which is gonna allow you to climb up that leaderboard. Have I already dropped a code somewhere in this video? I actually don't know. Editor Jake will let you know. Now, I wanted to start this video by asking the question, does your break-in actually matter?
Man, asking the internet why breaking in a motorcycle matters is like asking the internet what oil you should use. Everybody's got a different answer, and everybody's going to fight and argue and go to the mat over their particular belief about break-ins. Now, I have actually talked to people who build motors, and the point of a break-in is a couple of things. First and foremost, inside your motor, you're making sure that surfaces that may still have some little abrasion surfaces because of the machining, they get worn flat and worn smooth. And that's why it's important to run your motor at all sorts of different speeds throughout the break-in period. Sure, you want to start slow, but if you never get to the top end of your motor, if you never manage to work in, the higher end RPMs by, going around a corner, having a little bit of fun. If you never work in your motor at higher load, you're never going to teach that motor how it feels to run there until you're going to a racetrack. So the question is, how do I do it? I made an entire video going over it, but if you want the cliff notes, here's what I do. For the first 300 miles of a break-in, assuming it's a 600-mile break-in period, for the first 300 miles of that, I am by the book. Everything that the book says, I do. After 300, from 300 to 400, I now allow myself to get up to about 65% of what the bike is capable of in my estimation. I say in my estimation because that gives me a little bit of error up and down, because you want to vary the load on the bike. 400 to 500, I go all the way up to about 90-95%. So I'm still allowing myself to ride a bit more chill, but if I want to, I can open it up. And then for the last 100, I ride it like it's already broken in. The goal there is making sure that I've put the bike through just about everything I can possibly throw at it. And once that's done, it's time to get it in the garage to actually service the bike.
Now that we're back in the garage, it's time to turn the bike on again so that it warms back up because it's been sitting on the lift. will sit and stare at it, contemplate my life choices. There's really not a lot else to do while you're waiting for the oil to warm up. In case you've been living under a rock or you're all thumbs when it comes to wrenches, here's the basics of an oil change. 1. Undo the oil bolt and let the oil drain out into a pan, neighbor's driveway, protected estuary, or a water treatment facility. A lot of people get super weirded out when the oil on the first service doesn't come out a uniform black. If metal parts are rubbing and abrading, which they are in a break-in, I'd expect to see some color in the oil. So long as there aren't big chunks stuck to your drain plug, you're fine. I've been changing oil for like 10 years and never had an issue. Next, you gotta pull the filter. Helps to have a filter wrench or a strap wrench. Then dab some oil onto the O-ring on the new filter and screw it on. Let it get a little snug, then give it another quarter to a half turn. You're gonna be coming back to check this again later, so don't get monkey tight with it. Lastly, new oil goes in the bike. Now, with that out of the way, does that mean that your first service is done and it's ready to rock and roll? No. They don't call it a glorified oil change for nothing. There's a whole bunch of other checks that you should be running on your motorcycle, and let's blitz through them real fast. The first check is something I always like to do no matter what service I'm doing. It's not a perfect indicator of the motor's health, but if you pour the used oil into old oil jugs, you can measure exactly, more or less, how much oil you pulled out of the bike. It's a decent way of knowing if you're running low on oil, since most mortals can't look at a pan and know how much is in there. But for the specific first service stuff, you want to make sure that spinning parts spin properly and stationary parts don't. I work front to back, starting with the front axle nut, then the pinch bolts, then the caliper mounting bolts. If they're good, I repeat these steps on the other side. Then you have some often overlooked bolts, specifically those around your foot controls. You want to make sure that your pivot points pivot and pinch bolts pinch. Repeat on the other side. Moving further back, check your rear caliper bolts and your rear axle. Another thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you check your coolant, which on this is fine. And then they say in the Aprilia manual that you're going to want to lubricate your clutch lever. It feels fine to me. What's more important to me is if the clutch cable has stretched. And as of right now, I'm saying just a little bit of extra free play on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and work that out right now. And it takes, you know, like all of 2 seconds and I'm done. Some more intense stuff that you should be thinking about are the bearings on your bike, specifically your front and rear wheel bearings, as well as your steering head bearings. A quick and simple check is to make sure you get the wheel up in the air and sort of twist it on the axle. And if something feels weird, if you get any motion, you may have an issue. Chances are it's gonna be fine. And again, chances are if you've been riding it, you'll know if you have a bearing problem, especially at the steering head. You just want to make sure for the steering that it goes lock to lock really smooth. You'll feel it if you have a problem. Now, since we've still got the bike on the lift, before we take it off to do the final checks, I'm actually going to take an opportunity to install some new parts on this thing. These are a box of Evotech frame sliders as well as some axle sliders, which, given the fact that this bike is going to see some track time and some pretty aggressive laps, hopefully fingers crossed, this is a good opportunity to throw on some protection, because if I bin this bike, I'd rather replace sliders than plastics. So let's dive on in. Okay, now I just got to do that on the other side, and that's like the first 28 steps, I think. Well, now for some reason the O2 sensor has to come out, so that's fun. If I was smart, I'd do the exhaust now too, but I'm not, so I won't.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I had to replace this little piece right here. This is the factory one. This was a royal pain in the butt. It was actually easier to break a tab off to get it out, and you had to undo the radiator. So now though, we get to install this, which will go, wait, no, not that one. This one, which will go right there. I got the other side. Now I need to do this. So reading between the tea leaves here, I'm looking at this slider going there. So I need that hole, and I'm gonna have to probably undo this motor mount. So let's just start with the simple stuff. Let it be known that I don't love the idea of undoing a motor mount without something under the motor, but they don't call for it, so I'm just gonna assume that it doesn't need it. There we go. All right, now I think that means it's time for me to bolt this sucker back together. Yep. It just says reverse steps 1 through 10. So, okay. Back together it goes. Just imagine I did it. Mercifully, the axle sliders are gonna be a lot easier. And I know some people might look at this packaging and be like, what the heck? Why is it in a brown paper bag? That's because this is all recyclable. Evotech uses 100% recyclable materials, which is really cool. So, you know, just in case you actually care about that sort of thing. Installing this is so easy. If only the frame sliders were that simple. Next thing I want to get on the bike before we get it off the lift, set of tech spec tank grips right here. Chase said that when he went to a racetrack, he was annoyed by how many times he was smashing his family jewels into the tank. This is gonna solve that problem. So these have been baking in the sun for a little bit, and they're nice and pliable, so let's get them on the tank. Yeah, there we go. Now, my suit is gonna have something to grab onto. Now let's get the other one on there. Yeah. It always works better when these are good and hot, because then they smush into place really well. They're not exactly the same. This one's a little bit lower, but because there's so much surface area on there, I'm not super concerned. And I'm off by maybe like 1/4 of an inch, but that's okay. Turn it into a race bike. There's always something sketchy on a race bike. The last thing you're gonna need to do before you hit the road is actually go in and adjust your chain. This thing, I guarantee you, has changed shape over 600 miles. Right now, the actual spec for the Aprilia is 1.18 inches of travel, and I've got almost 2 inches, so I'm gonna need to get to work. With some practice, you can get the chain slack set in under 5 minutes. For me, it took just a little over 3. Start by cracking your axle nut loose, and then loosen the lock nut on the adjuster bolt. Some bikes will have different styles of adjusters, but the principle is the same. If the chain is too loose, the tire needs to go backwards. If it's too tight, it needs to come forward. You can accomplish this by turning the adjuster and measuring as you go. Remember, any adjustment you make to one side needs to be mirrored on the other. I always count the threads to make sure I'm as close as possible. It's not exact, but it's never let me down so far. You also need to check the slack in multiple places since chains do not wear uniformly. This is also a good opportunity to just clean and lube the chain. Once you're done, lock the rear axle down and you're good to go. Now with all that done, you want to take the bike out for one last ride and make sure that everything feels good. We didn't make any major changes to this motorcycle, so I would expect it to ride just as good as it did when it came into the garage for the first service. At this point, you're mostly just making sure that when you did the chain, you actually have that rear tire on straight. But other than that, it really is that simple. You could go in and make sure that your brake fluid is fine, but I can see it right here. The color's okay. I know all the technology on this thing is working because I've been riding it. On some modern motorcycles, you will have to take it into the dealership to have them plug it in and turn off the service wrench if you can't do it yourself. But on this motorcycle, I can install this upmap tuner right here, and that'll actually allow me to turn the service light off myself, which actually gives me a really good segue into what you can expect next from this bike. Over there, I have a full SC Project exhaust, a sprint filter, and this tune right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this over to AF1, we're gonna spin it on the dyno, bone stock, and see what it makes, and then we're gonna start installing these parts and then the tune in order, and we're gonna see which one has the biggest effect. We're also just gonna see what this bike is finally making once I put all the parts that I possibly can on here to make it go quick, because it's got a little extra weight to haul around compared to Chase and Ebe, so I have been working. I've cut like 15 pounds, so that helps, but still, I'm a bigger dude than those guys, so anything I can do to make my bike faster will be well worth it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.